I'm going to talk about mobile today. It's going to be a story of an app that I worked on that involved a lot of automation, a lot of working in Agile, and obviously a lot of mobile. So I do make a joke, because I've already heard a phone. If you have a phone, put your phone in the normal setting you have it in. But the conference organizer will probably then get annoyed because the video will have to edit out everyone's phone going off. But normally, put your phones on, I don't mind. Actually, I should go back. This isn't going to be like a, well, it is going to be inspirational, but like everyone goes on about keynotes being this big inspirational thing to get people going and motivate people. I'm going to share a story, which I think is a good story. Is it going to be motivational? I hope so, but it's not my goal. My goal is to share a story that I think is benefit to everybody. As they mentioned, my name's Richarda Bradshawa. I officially work for Friendly Testing, but I'm now also part of Ministry of Testing. Does anyone know the Ministry of Testing? A few people know Ministry of Testing. Awesome. We are awesome, so if you don't know us, you should have a look. We also have a YouTube channel called Whiteboard Testing, which is little short, no more than 10-minute videos about testing with me stood in front of a whiteboard. Sounds really boring, but it's pretty good fun. I blog, as mentioned, and I tweet a lot, and I really like bacon. That's an interesting fact for you. And I also really like beer. And I went to a beer festival where someone combined bacon and beer. They don't belong together. Don't do that. It's not nice. It's actually rather unpleasant. So, mobile phones. Everyone uses their mobile phones, and they use them everywhere. They use them out and about. So here's me in front of the Chopin statue yesterday using my mobile phone. Here's me in a park using my mobile phone. Here's me at a really awesome statue using my mobile phone. Here's me, I'm waiting for the president. He was late. He was like 10 minutes late. I was getting annoyed, so I started looking at my bank balance. I started sending some tweets. I was waiting for the church, went into the Holy Cross Church, very nice. This sign made me laugh. So I got my girlfriend to take a picture of it. And then I was having a beer using my phone. So we use our phones absolutely everywhere. And also I got to see Warsaw, which is a really beautiful place. You're all very lucky for those who live here. It's also massive compared to where I live. It's like 10 times as big. It takes a lot of effort walking across. However, this is how most of us test our mobile apps. We sit in an office, nice and warm, the best Wi-Fi that you got a nice cup of coffee, and you just sit there all day. And the annoying thing that most people do as well, we'll spend most of our time on the actual laptop, not actually on the mobile phones. So this is a common pattern that I see of how we go about testing mobile apps. Nice and cozy, the best Wi-Fi that you can have, and it gets us quite far, but it's not a replacement for getting out in the field and walking around Warsaw using your mobile phone. Also, I forgot to say, this park, I can't remember, I don't know how you pronounce the name of this park. I spent an hour feeding red squirrels. It's awesome. I actually went to a shop after I'd run out of nuts to buy more nuts. They're so friendly. Anyway, that's a sidetrack, but I just wanted to make it. So, there's a really cool guy called Dana Sakur. Dana Sakur is an Indian guy who worked for a company called Moola, and they became the go-to place in India to do mobile testing. And he did a talk one day, and he told me that it was a sin to test a mobile app at your desk. And at the time, I was like, well, that makes perfect sense. It's a mobile app. But then I looked at the way I was testing, and I was testing mostly at my desk. So I tweaked it, and I said, it's a sin to only test a mobile app at your desk. Which I think makes it a lot clearer. We are obsessed with testing mobile apps just in our offices. We don't go out and about as much as we like. So I made a slight tweak. I sent this to Dana Sakur, and he went, that's brilliant, Richard. It's like, if I'd wrote that originally, I'd be as famous as you. And I said, no, that's not true. You need to be as good looking as me as well. But he agreed that it was more to be, it's about being, it's only a sin. We do need to do both. We can do a lot in our offices, but we can do a lot out and about as well. And I'm going to annoy the cameraman because it's such a wide room. I'm going to have to walk because there's loads of people everywhere. So this is the story of the app I'm going to talk to you about. It's an app called O2 Priority. O2 is a network in the UK for mobile phones, and they had an app called Priority, which was like an incentive app. We gave you free stuff through the app. The app was free, and it gave you free stuff for being part of a customer of O2. So this is what happened when I left. When I left O2, Our app in the App Store was 5 stars overall. Its overall rating was 5 stars. And there isn't an awful lot of apps in the App Store with an overall rating of 5 stars. When I joined, it was about 4.1, I think, something like that. And then the Android one ended up at 4.5. Now, if anyone gets to 5 stars in the Android store, like, you need to, like, go and sell training to the whole world. I have no idea how you'd get to 5 stars in the Android store. Android's just so fragmented, it's painful. But when I joined, it was 2.8. And then when I left, it was 4.5. And I left about 4 months ago now. So this is the story of where I got to. This is what I want to share. And I think these numbers are pretty impressive. We had nearly, well, you can see it. It's about 36,000 on iOS and about 45,000 on Android. So it's some interesting ratings. Now, it's a beautiful journey. It is a beautiful story to tell. And because it was full of joy, excitement, there was lots of failure as well. But overall, it was a nice journey. It was hazardous, that's what the mountains are there for. But it was a really fun, interesting story. So the first thing I did, I deleted all the mobile automation. I literally I pressed play, and about 40% of them failed. So I just went Control-A and delete. And the tester who was on the project at the time pretty much pulled a face like this. He was like, "What are you doing? All the effort I've put into this." And we spent about an hour chatting about him. And is anyone familiar with the sunk cost fallacy? That's what we'd got to. He had spent best part of about 2 months trying to automate our app using Appium. And he had about a 60% pass rate with his automation that he created. And it was painful. He was telling me of stories where he spent the best part of 2 days trying to make it scroll. And I was like, "You're never going to get that time back." And he's like, I know. It's like I've invested so much, but I have to make it work. And I said to him, "This isn't helping the app because you're spending all your time testing, trying to get Appium to work, that you're missing actually testing the app." So I deleted it. He didn't talk to me for about a day. And then for that whole day, I spent the time testing and found lots of bugs. And then he went, "Okay, I think you might have a point." But anyway, his face was not very happy. So this is how the story started. This was day 2 on the project, and I literally did delete all his work, which he wasn't happy about. All right, so a quick poll in the room, because I like to do this. Who's on Apple? Anyone put your hand up if you're on Apple? Good. Who's on Android? Yes. Yeah, so all the Apple people can leave. Apple doesn't work. We've just seen Apple doesn't work. So I kind of expected this, and the reason why I expected it is because my analytics told me from my blog that all the Polish people read my blog in Android. So that's actually, I'm glad that worked. If everyone had iOS, I'd be like, "Oh no." But no, analytics were really useful. They allowed me to actually get insight into what people do. And it turns out, just from that quick experiment, they're quite accurate. But yeah, does anyone not have Android or iOS? Any Windows Phone people? I know I saw, I used to mock you about 6 months ago, but Microsoft are doing incredible things, so I think you might be, you're a very, very early adopter, but you might be on the right wave. They are doing some fantastic things at the moment. So let's talk about analytics. Let's go this way to annoy this guy as well. So the analytics were the first thing that after deleting the automation, the analytics were the first few things that I decided to add in, mostly because I had no idea what our users were doing in our app. I didn't use the app. I'm on Vodafone. That was the first thing I told O2. I was like, "I'm not even on your network. Well, I think your network sucks." But they were like, "It's okay, we'll forgive you." So I started implementing analytics. So the first thing I did was to go through our app, get familiar with the app, and then work out what I could put into the app so I knew what was happening. So I started adding loads of analytics. So obviously I wanted to know what devices people were using. The amount of devices in this room, if we were to draw them out, we'd probably have at least 50 different phones in this room, if not more, probably 100 phones. There's so many phones out there, and especially now 90% of this room are on Android, that's even more fragmentation. I wanted to know what screens were being used. I wanted to get an insight into what the most popular parts of my app were so that I could test those up and decide what areas to automate if I was going to. I wanted to know what resolutions we have. Does anyone in the room have a Samsung Galaxy S4 Mini? That's the worst phone in the world. If you have it, please burn it. Have a little sacrifice and burn it. It is atrocious. It's one of the very few phones that its DPI is like completely different to everybody else's. So if you make a really pretty app that's nice and square, it will look like this on an S4 Mini. It's atrocious. I wanted to know what operating systems we had and what versions. Obviously iOS and Android. No, iOS have joined Android now and they're pushing a lot more frequently. So I wanted to know what versions people were using. I wanted to know how much time they were spending in our app. I wanted to know what screens they were spending that on. I wanted to know if they were coming from the background or the foreground. I don't know if any of you test mobile apps, but it makes a significant difference to how the operating system handles your app, whether it stays open or it's always open fresh. And apps have different behaviors on that as well. One of the things we wanted to know, we use Bluetooth extensively in our app, and we had no idea how many users actually had Bluetooth enabled. Turns out you can spy on people. You can spy on loads of things. So we started tracking whether they had Bluetooth on, whether they had location services on. We then started check's not a real word. We started checking whether they had accessibility things turned on. Basically just masses of information. But it allowed me to actually know what the users were really doing with our applications, which meant that I could design tests, I could talk to the stakeholders actually about factual things. So this might not sound like a job a tester should do. However, I needed this information, so I worked with the team to push this into our application. Now, this is not specific to mobile either. You should be doing this for all your apps. Not all the apps, but a lot of you will have analytics, and they're really important. So this was the first thing I did. I pushed as much analytics into our app so I could get as much data as possible, after I deleted all that guy's code. Now, the next thing I did is, this was a very public app. It was used in the public domain. It had, this probably sounds really low for such a bigger population, but it had about 2.8 million active users, something along those lines. And because it was a public app, everyone spoke about it. It used to had TV adverts. It had lots of advertising around it. So there was lots of chatter about it. So there was an awesome chap called Pradeep. I'm not going to try. It's Soundararajan. He actually told me that. He spent an hour trying to teach me how to say his name, and I still can't say his name. But a really awesome chap called Pradeep. Again, he was actually from the same company as Dana Sakir, but he created this concept of Twitter-driven testing. Basically, he was working in India for, I think it's called Flipkart. It's like Amazon. And he started going through Twitter, looking at all the complaints, and using those to drive his testing. So I thought, genius. I can do some of that. So I started going through Twitter, and I would see lots of users saying, I can't redeem my free stuff. Your app is rubbish. And then a lot of common things. We used to do this thing where you could get lunch for £1. So the equivalent here would be you get lunch for like five zloty or something like that. And if it didn't work, people went crazy because now they had to pay 10 zloty for all their dinner. So they used to go mental, and they'd complain to the support team, you've cost me £1 more. And it's like, it's just £1. Calm down. But no, they were like, no, who wrote this app? And then you get the famous one. Has anyone even tested this app? That hurt. Reading that, I'm like, oh my God. It's like, do you know what I spent at least 10 minutes testing that app? But I used to feel, they give me motivation to do some more testing. And also, when they used to say they had errors, it used to drive me. I used to know that something was possible then. Some behavior did exist, and I needed to find a way of how it worked. So I started using Twitter, and then we started using Facebook, and then I hit the jackpot. I started looking in the Play Store and the App Store. Now, if you think you get hate on Twitter, you get a lot more hate in the App Store. And they're pretty brutal in the App Store as well, because you get the 1-star rating. I reckon if there was a no-star rating or negative rating, people would do that too. But I used to get so much abuse. Again, similar lines. This hasn't been tested. Do you even own my phone? Was a common one that came up. There's no way you could have ran this on my phone. But we used to get positive things as well. It used to say, I was able to get my free lunch, I was able to redeem this, the app's really nice, the UX really good. So I started getting more information. So you can see there's a bit of a pattern between these two. They're literally about gaining more information about the app, what the users are doing, something that is outside of being able to automate that kind of stuff. And so if you've never tried looking in social media for your app, if you do have a social media app, well, not social media app, if you do have an app that's in the public space, just go and see what people are saying about you. As we've established, I use Twitter a lot. So I have a little column in TweetDeck, or I did for the app, use a little hashtag for the app, just to see the abuse that people wanted to give me. But there's lots of information out there. And even blogs. We had one person, I don't know why, but they decided to blog about the app. Now, the app had lots of free offers in it, probably like about 100 offers. He would redeem each offer and then write a review, which I found fascinating. I don't know why this person did it. I don't know what they do in their spare time. But he would write, when the app didn't work, he would literally write the best bug report you've ever seen. He would fill it with screenshots. He'd record himself using the phone. And then at the end of it, he'd slam us for not testing it. He would write, "Do you see what I did above? Yeah, that's what you should be doing." Which, again, it hurts, but it's good to know. So this is what this kind of information led me to. This kind of information led to basically generating hundreds and not thousands of test ideas. Without this information, some of these tests I may never have even dreamt of. But as soon as I got some interesting information, I was able to go about testing some of these ideas. And it meant that I was getting truly valuable information that my customers and my users and my stakeholders were really interested in. Now, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the word serendipity, but it's this idea of that good fortune comes to those who are trying to do stuff. So the fact that I was spending a lot of time actually testing the app, using the app, interacting with the app, meant that I was finding lots of fascinating information. Now, the reason why I can say test ideas is I'm a big advocate of session-based test management and exploratory testing. So all this information, I would just get the dashboard up, and I would look at it, and I would design some test ideas, and I would just do them in real time. So as I said, it might sound like a lot of information to gather, but it's really valuable information, and it leads to some fascinating test ideas. Now, the next thing we did, it turns out our app sucked. It turns out that when we introduced this Monday £1 lunch thing, literally, it is not even a big number, so it's not even that. I build it up like it's really big. Literally 5,000 people would use our app concurrently, and it would die. It would literally just fall over. And we didn't know why. We were wondering, was it the app? Was the app broken? What was the app? Was it somehow sending a billion requests and not working? So the developers came along and said, we need some monitoring. And I went, fantastic idea. And then they went away. and then they came back again, and I went, so what are we going to monitor? And he went, oh, that's up to you. You decide that. And I was like, I have no idea what to monitor. I didn't have a clue. So we did add some monitoring in. And it turns out we added the monitoring in at the API, not at the mobile app. The mobile app was full of analytics already, so we added the monitoring to our APIs. And what it meant was we could actually see how many people were on our app in real time, which is when we found out that 5,000 was the magic number that made the app fall over. Which is shocking. This is an app used by like 2.8 million users, and if 5,000 log on, it dies. And the literally server just does die. It wasn't even a graceful failure, it just killed itself. So we added lots of monitoring so we could see these users. And then the other thing was, it just meant that we had real insight into when our app was used. We were able to find when we should release our app. We were able to find windows of opportunity to release our app, make changes, do tweaks. But more also, it led to some really interesting performance test ideas. Because we used to think that our performance would just spike every day. It turns out it doesn't. On a Monday, it goes like this, and every other day, it just goes like this. So we found out Monday was our key important day. And as I said, we started looking at the crash analytics as well. So we used to have something called crash analytics. Turns out O2 don't want to pay for crash analytics. It's quite expensive. So then we moved to Hockey App. And then Hockey App said, no, you've got too many users, you need to pay for that. So then we moved to Fabric. We kept moving between the free ones. But the crash analytics were great because that was actually genuine crashes happening to our users. So as soon as the app crashed, we would get a report and we could recreate the exact steps. I don't know if anyone's done it in Xcode, but you can actually re-import the crash into Xcode and it will replay it for you, which is quite interesting and good to observe. So we filled the app with monitoring, and that meant we had a real good idea of what was going on in our app. So we knew what users were doing, I knew what they were saying about me, and also I could actually now spy on them. I could see them in real time and what they were doing. So that was great. That meant I was getting lots of testing in, and I knew what to test. I had ideas of what to do. But I didn't really know, I wasn't really sure how people were using the app. I knew what screens they were on, but I didn't really know how they were like using our devices and holding the phone and interacting with it. So this is why this is really important. Usability really matters in mobile. The reason the rating was so high is we had an incredible UX team, and they used to have these labs. They used to go and get people off the street. They used to stand outside their office and go, do you want to earn £50? And the person on their lunch would go, well, I've got half an hour. And they'd come in and they'd strap them up to a computer, put a little cameras on a little head mask with cameras on it, and they'd get them to test our app. And it was great because you see people do crazy stuff. They pick their phone up, and then one lady turned her phone upside down, and she used her phone upside down for the whole thing. And then someone asked her, why'd you do that? And she said, well, if I hold my phone this way, my finger's always on my camera and it gets dirty. So she holds her phone this way. And I was like, that's insane. Like, why did you do that? And then there was a person who holds it like it's a games console and using 2 fingers. And we found interesting bugs because one of the people used to hold their phones like this, use this thumb to type, and you'd see them stretching. They used to go like this, I can't reach. And then you'd change how they were holding their phone to reach instead of using their other hand. And I was like, why are you doing that? We spoke to him and he went, I've just never used this hand. It's like, well, you do know it exists, right? And he was like, yeah, it's just easy to stretch over. And what was happening when he would stretch, half of our app would move. So there was a weird bug where if you could touch 3 elements of the UI and move at the same time, they would all move across the screen. And we found that because someone doesn't know how to use a phone. So usability does matter. Find out how people are holding your phone, how they're interacting with your phone. Are they using their thumbs, their fingers? Are they swiping? Are they using 2 fingers at the same time? And you can't find that using automation. You can't find that without really watching someone test or purposely trying to do this. But this is really important in the app. I do believe this is why the app started increasing in rating. We started spending a lot of time on UX, and UX is really valuable. Now, hardware also matters. We spoke about fragmentation very briefly. Apple as well, and iOS now are very fragmented again. They've gone down the same route. Lots of different screen sizes now, lots of different speeds. Android's always been that way. Android's got thousands and thousands of devices, but the hardware is really important. We started using Bluetooth beacons in our app. I've never learned so much about Bluetooth in my life. It was the dullest weekend I've ever had. But turns out there's loads of different ways of using Bluetooth, loads of different adapters, loads of different sensors, and they really screw with your app. So you need to be aware of the hardware that's being used. Battery's a great one. There's a really famous company that really care about batteries at the moment because their phones keep blowing up. So, we do need to care about the hardware, processors, RAM, screens. Now, this is one fascinating thing that this makes me think of. We used to care about this when we used to test desktop. 10 years ago, this used to be on our concerns. We used to care about the resolution of the desktop. We used to care that the computer only had 2 gig of RAM, or even less than that in some cases. We used to care about the processors. Yet we don't anymore. Well, I don't anymore, but because we're obsessed with just in the browser now. We're in the browsers, and the browsers are quite stable, and we do less and less on the desktop, even though that's probably going to change because Microsoft are doing lots of awesome stuff. But we had ways of solving this problem. We used to create device matrix. Did anyone used to make device matrix? I had a massive device matrix. It was like printed on this A5 piece of paper that no one ever looked at. So I didn't make the same mistakes. We started going through all the analytics, finding out the exact devices people were using, and those are the ones we decided to test on, and those are the ones we later on decided to automate on. But we found lots of issues. GPS was a killer for us because the app used to want to know where you were, and then it would say there's lots of great offers around you. So we needed to use GPS. So talking about getting out in the wild, I got approval. Well, I didn't really need approval, but I got approval from my team to be able to just go and walk around London for 6 hours a day, testing the app. And all I was doing was looking for the GPS, see if it was sending the right locations. Now, one of my managers went, aren't you just testing the phone? Like, you're not really testing our app. And I went, yeah, kind of, but it gets me out of the office. I don't have to look at you. I don't have to talk to you. And, I like to be on my own sometimes. But it turns out actually testing the phone I found lots of bugs in our app. If GPS decided to freeze and not get a lock, our app would I'm going to swear, it would lose its shit. It would then try and find a GPS signal for the next 5 minutes until it got a lock again and then send it. So getting out and about, looking at hardware really helped me as well. This is this beautiful stadium. So it's got 58,145 seats, apparently, in the inside. Now, I'm a big football fan, so I'm going to tell you that I'm a Man United fan, which some people might not like that. But I'm a Man United fan, and I used to go to Old Trafford a lot, and Old Trafford at the moment is about 94,000 on a full day, and my phone doesn't work. I get my phone out with all those people around, and I can't do nothing. I try and connect to the Wi-Fi. Apparently it's free Wi-Fi. You can tell why it's free, because it doesn't work. My 3G signal dies, and it's because there's 90,000 people all sat there going, United just scored, Rooney got sent off, or here's a picture of my son at the football. And everything just dies. Now, if you try and use your phone in that environment, it behaves in incredibly weird ways. It thinks it's got full signal, so it tells your app it's got full signal. And then your app doesn't know what to do because it tries to do the things it should do when you've got full signal, and none of them work. You get told you've got no signal, but you've actually got full signal. I've had that happen to me. So going sitting in a stadium is really valuable. So what did I do? Big football fan. I went to my boss and I said, we need to test our app at the next England game. And he went, what? I went, yeah, I think we should do that. It's only going to cost about £50. And he looked at me and he went, all right, whatever. So I went to the game and I actually started testing our app in the game, which was actually useful because it ended 0-0 and it was incredibly boring. But I found lots of issues. But I also learned a really important lesson. If you're trying to test in weird situations, your app needs as much logging as you can put into it. I didn't have any logging, so I reported lots of bugs, but we couldn't work out what was wrong. So I had to go to another football game. I put loads of logging in, but this time I went to a rugby game. I went to Twickenham because O2 sponsor the rugby, so I went to the rugby. Not as many people because rugby's not as good, but we did find lots of issues. But yeah, so if you are going to go out and about and you're going to go and try it in different situations, put as much logging in your app. One of the other things I do is on the train. If you get the train to work, start testing the app on the train, or if you've got the underground or whatever it is your journey to work, try and test the app on it. More importantly, tell your boss that you're working and now your commute is part of your day. So you only have to do 6 hours in the office. That's even better. But again, you find lots of interesting stuff. So this is the little dance. Has anyone ever done this dance? Your phone's not working, so you turn Wi-Fi off. Nope, still not working. Put it in flight mode. Basically trying to trick your app, your phone, into actually doing what you want it to do. Again, I did this, and it turns out if you put the phone in flight mode, the app will crash. Well, it did crash. It doesn't crash anymore, but it used to crash. So there's lots of weird things you can do with your app to try and make it misbehave. So this was, again, stolen by Dennis Kerr, but it's a mnemonic that really helps me remember how to do lots of different testing. So obviously we mentioned location. Does your app use GPS? Does it matter where you are? How does that impact your app? You've got orientation, as I said, the crazy person who used their app phone upside down. Again, fascinating. Network gestures. So the gestures, as I said, swiping, how they use your app. Do they do things the right way? And then obviously the rest of them are easy. Updates is a fascinating one. Does anyone test their app using the update flow? So it used to be really difficult to do. You had to in Android, just type loads of commands. But for Xcode, you couldn't put your app in the App Store because Apple liked to vet everything. So it was actually quite a difficult thing to test. But our app used to misbehave when you updated it. It used to delete the user's data. So they always had to log in again. Which, funny enough, we found it by using the monitoring. We kept getting huge spikes in our login. And we're like, well, our users haven't gone up. We've still got the same number of users. And it turned out the app was kicking them out. So then they had to register again, which I got lots of complaints about. So as we said in the introduction, I like to talk a lot about automation. So this is an Agile Automation conference, so we should talk about automation. So as I said, I deleted it all. There wasn't any. End of the automation chapter. No, I'm joking. I wrote some more. Yes! So I did. I wrote loads more. Let's have a look at what we wrote. So the first thing I want to talk about is testability. Our app was impossible to test. It sucked. It had no hooks. It had very little logging. It had very little output. So I needed to change that. So I started looking at ways to introduce testability into our app. And as it says there, if you're not familiar with the word, it's basically how easy the app makes it to test. And there's lots of things you can do. Logging, hooks for automation, little ways of manipulating data and state. So if you're not familiar with the word testability, There's literally loads of information out there, and this, to me, is the future of where automation engineers are heading. Right now, we're obsessed with writing lots of automated checks and things, but we need to make our app and our websites easier to test. And that's where testability comes in. So the first thing I did is I added locators to all the things. So I went in and I went on all the screens and I added IDs to everything. I asked the developers to do this, and he went, "That's not important." So then I said, "Can I borrow you for half an hour?" And he taught me how to add IDs into Xcode and into Android Studio, which meant I could do it all myself. So I did. I spent about 2 days adding IDs to everything. Every single element on the screen, I added IDs to it. And it failed miserably. It didn't help me at all. I could now find things and I could like do stuff with them, but basically, as soon as I asked the app to click on them or I asked it to go to another screen or transition, it would just fall over. So it didn't really help, but it turns out there was a byproduct of this. It improved our accessibility rating because I'd chosen names that made sense, like label username and text box username. It turns out that the screen reader for iOS read them out. So when we have an third party do accessibility, and they came back and said, "Oh, you've improved accessibility," and the whole team looked at each other and went, "I've done nothing." "Have you done anything?" "I haven't done anything." And then we found out it was because of this. And the reason it failed. Now, let me make it clear. This was literally just over 2 years ago. The mobile automation tools, especially for doing any kind of UI automation, they sucked. They were incredibly immature. And it made me reflect on a few things. The first thing was, I used to contribute to WebDriver. Now, it's taken WebDriver about 10 years to get to the place it is now where it's actually quite stable. We have very few issues with WebDriver as much as we used to. WebDriver took that amount of time. And it wasn't WebDriver that became stable. It was the browsers. The browsers became stable. They all were a big push for HTML5, and they all got past that, and then they kind of plateaued. They're now all at a relatively same state. Now, mobile operating systems are not stable. They're roughly the same age, but especially in the automation space, in 9.3, iOS deleted all their automation code, and they rewrote it. So it just broke everything. All the tools that were out there, they just kind of started breaking and falling over, and they needed rewriting because they introduced XC UI test. Android had the same problems. UI Automator was awful to use, and now they've replaced it with Espresso and UI Automator 2. But at the time of me trying to do this, I literally couldn't do anything, and it was really embarrassing because the guy who had spent like 2 months trying to write automation, it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to realize that I couldn't get very far. And then he laughed at me. He was like, "I told you." The tools were incredibly immature. When it wasn't the fact that what I was trying to do was right. I was trying to automate the right things, but the tools just weren't good enough for me to use. So I needed a new plan. I needed a way of using automation that would help with this mobile testing problem. And the right thing was, it took me about 2 days, and the thing I ended up finding was my own blog. So in researching to find out what to do, it was my own blog that I found, and I went, of course. What a genius that person is. I needed a way of finding and improving the testing that was going on. So that's exactly what I did. That doesn't fit on the screen. But what it does say is I focused on improving the testing I was doing and how I could make it easier and faster. So instead of trying to replace what I was doing, I thought, how can I make this quicker for me? I was literally obsessed with trying to make Appium do what I wanted it to do. So he spent a long time trying to make Appium scroll. I spent 5 hours trying to make Appium click a button. Again, time I would never get back. I did make it click the button, which I'm very proud of. But then the next day I deleted it anyway. So it didn't really help. But basically I started trying to think of ways that I'm testing this way now. How can I improve this process? So instead of trying to change it, take this process and automate it, how can I take little bits of it and make it easier to use? So the first thing I did was the way I tested. This was our device lab at the time. Don't all phones look the same? This is the deaf phone here. Don't use this phone. This is the deaf phone. That's the S4 Mini. Don't use it. I've left the place now, but the guy, one of my friends who replaced me, apparently that phone is now dropped out of the analytics, so he doesn't have to use it. but I think he should still burn it. So what I did was a thing called blink testing. So you can read about this on my blog, and it's an idea from a chap called James Back, where you can you basically do things next to each other and try and spot these little differences. Or you look at a screen, close your eyes, and quickly look at it again, and things just jump out at you. So what I did is I started testing all the apps at the same time. Now, when I joined, the guy called Shiva who was working there, the first meeting, actually, this was before I deleted his code, but the first meeting before that, we had a talk about regression testing for this new release. And he told me it would take 2 weeks. And I was just sat there going, 2 weeks? Not a chance. Like, I'm not doing regression testing for 2 weeks. And he went, no, Richard, you're new. I've been here a while. It takes 2 weeks. And I went, it doesn't take 2 weeks. And he went, you couldn't possibly know. And then he went, well, I've got 96 scenarios in my spreadsheet, and I've got 13 devices that I need to run it on. And then he explained to me, like, going, this takes X amount of time. And I went, oh, that's about 2 weeks. And he went, yeah, I said it was 2 weeks. It turns out, though, what he did was he would get one phone, set up all the data, test that one phone, then start again. Set up the data, get the next phone, and start again. So it's just incredibly slow. So I started lining all the phones up, and I became like this little ninja of using mobile phones. I'd line them all up, and I'd just go tap, 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 and I'd wait for it to all finish, and then you'd spot the odd phone that would take ages to do anything. The odd phone that would just like, fucking hell, hurry up. And then at the start of it, you'd ignore it, because it's like you think you're trying to run your test. But then after that, I started realizing that was actually a fault. That was actually not how it should be. And then you'd look at the phone and go, you're like one of the state-of-the-art phones. How can you be slower than the crappy deaf phone? So then I started trying to tweak it. But also, as I mentioned about UX and the way it looked, I started spotting little uniform issues with the way the app felt and looked. Some of the buttons were off, the screen resolution shrunk, the images were stretched. And I would not have found that if I didn't line the phones side by side. But at the time, we only had 5 iOS phones. Now there will probably be a similar line of iOS devices. But it's a really interesting way of testing your mobile app. You can find some really interesting things. And you also pick them up as well. Don't just line them out. But it works quite nicely. Now, the next thing was based on the same story from Shiva. He was spending all his time creating data, but he was doing it manually. So he would literally, new scenario, manually create data. And it was very, very dull to watch him do this. So I went, it can't be that difficult to automate the creation of data. No, it's just data. No, I was massively wrong. So you know I mentioned our app sucked and the performance was terrible? Turns out they turned Mongo into a relational database. So yeah, if anyone knows what databases are, it's not a good thing. So what happened was, if you wanted to create an offer, which was the thing people were redeeming, it touched 74 different collections. So I tried to create a script that did that. And I got to line 500 and went, this is mental. And again, it probably took me about half a day to get to line 500. But it turns out the way they created data was, the way they created their database structure was completely impossible to work with. So I scrapped that idea, and we wrote some code using WebDriver that created data via the UI. So I basically automated what we were doing using WebDriver. Now, it sounds like a terrible idea, but it was taking me about 2 minutes to create an offer. It took WebDriver about 25 seconds, which is significantly quicker. And then the next thing we did was we looked at how can we go back to having some automated checks, automated tests. So I started stubbing the API. So it turns out that most mobile apps are stupid. They don't actually do a lot. Most of the business logic and the actual power is in the API. So I went, well, if all that's over there, how can I test my app in isolation? I don't care about the API, it's not important. So I stubbed the whole API. I fired up the tool of choice at the time, which was Node.js, because that's what everyone was talking about. So I went, I'll use Node, I'll be one of the cool kids. And I got a stub up and running in no time, just replying dummy JSON back that made my app function. So I could test my app, just my app, in isolation. So when it broke, I knew it was the app that was broken. Or sometimes it was my crappy JavaScript coding. But either way, I was finding interesting issues. So the fact of this data thing, this was the first thing I did to help Shiva. So instead of it taking him 2 weeks to do this, it got it down to 3 weeks, because he had the data was automated, and I changed the way he worked using the blink testing approach. So we got it down to 3 weeks. But if you've not automated the data creation in your company, that is one of the things I strongly advise you to do. So breaking away from mobile, Automating that allows you to do lots of fun testing, but also sets the foundation for your automated test, and they can be really important. So the next thing I did was I started using proxies. And this was a tweet not too long ago, but I actually stand by this now. I actually could not test a mobile app again without using a proxy. Proxies are just so powerful. So I'm on a Mac, so I opted for Charles because Fiddler doesn't really compile very well on a Mac. It uses Mono, but Fiddler's coming to iOS if anyone cares about that. But these are some of the things that I started to do. Now, one of the things we do when we test mobile apps, we just trust that they got the right data. We just trust that they work. If we put some data in the database and it appears on the screen, we're kind of like, well, that works. There's nothing going wrong here. But if you use a proxy, you can actually see the data going to your app. You can actually guarantee that it's getting that data and that's driving this behavior, which I could never see before. I was just assuming that it was working. Some of the other interesting things, we can see what headers are being received. It turns out because of the security reasons, the headers were really important. I couldn't test that without using a proxy. I could get it to log it out on the other side, but then I don't know if the logging works. So this really helped me with that. And then I could just test different status codes. I don't know if any of you have the ability, but I've never had the ability in my app or in my APIs just to go, I now want you to return a 418 or a 410 or whatever. I just want all these different status codes. It can't be done. And 418 is a really awesome status code. It's 418 teapot. That's what it stands for. I have no idea why it exists. Someone else might know. But we started doing lots of things with proxies. So now I could manipulate status codes. I could try crazy data scenarios without having to put that data in my database. So instead of creating weird long strings in my database, I could just hijack the request, manipulate the data, and send it onto my app and watch it cry. And there was just other things you can do. I said data manipulation is the most common one, and also just easy way of putting your app in a specific state. So if you've never tried using a proxy, I strongly, strongly encourage you. And anyone who's coming to the class tomorrow, we're going to use proxies there as well. The next thing I did was I actually started to try and do some automated checks again. I actually thought, no, we're about 1.5 years down the line now. I've got all my data creation in place. I can do some automation now. So I started using Appium again, and it fell over again. So what I could do, though, is I went, well, I'm doing all this testing. I've got all this analytics, all this information, and I'm creating these test ideas. However, I'm spending probably the best part of half an hour to an hour installing the app on all these phones. So I'd get a new phone, and I'd then click on it, Google Drive, APK, click install, wait for it to install, then log myself in, and then I was good to test. I thought, I can get Appium to do that. So I wrote a tool. It doesn't work on iOS, but I wrote a tool for Android that basically as many phones as I could plug into my laptop, it would install the app on, start them all, and then log me in with unique data. And it literally took about 45 seconds to do about 15 phones. So I would kick it off, go make a cup of tea, come back, and everything was ready to test on. And that's probably one of the best tools I think I've ever built. That saved literally days of the time that I would have spent manually clicking there, installing the app. So that was the kind of automation that was really starting to add value in the team. So this was one of my Jira tickets. This was the title of one of my Jira tickets. Make the impossible testable. And I created it. Stuff started happening at work, and it got ignored. It got put to the bottom of the backlog for about a month. And then one of the developers found it, and he came to me, and he printed it out on a piece of paper, and he went, what does this mean? And I went, I have no idea. And he was like, well, what's impossible? I went, everything's impossible. And then we sat down, and we actually ended up chatting about what was impossible. Now, we had some features in our app, and a lot of apps have them. If you do a certain behavior, it sets a certain flag, and then the next behavior works based on that flag. I couldn't see these flags. I didn't know what they were set to. I couldn't programmatically set these flags. So I used to use behavior in the app, which would then set the flag. And then I'd see if that worked. So I said, this sucks. So what he did is he built a screen inside the app that only I could see, where you could control these values. You could set them to 1 or 2. And that meant I could easily do those testing scenarios. It sped up what I was doing. The other thing that he did, we had a development environment, a testing environment, staging, and live. If I wanted to do some testing on live, I had to rebuild the app with using those APIs to point to live. So he added a little switch to the top of the heads-up display up here on the app. You can't see it, but basically this little bar at the top, if I double tapped it, it changed the environment. If I double tapped it again, it changed it again, which meant I didn't need loads of different builds. Prior to that, we were doing 3 builds for every release. Like, yeah, sure, it was automated, but it was taking up loads of space, and it was just a bit poor. So we started changing all those kind of things. So the future is getting brighter. I was at Selenium conference on Monday, and there was lots of talks about mobile testing, lots of things that people have changed. Appium were telling us all the awesome things that they've started doing. So what has changed? So firstly, Apple have realized that people want to actually test apps. Apple have realized that testing's a thing. So they've made XC UI test, which is like instruments on steroids. It actually works. It's quite powerful. It's relatively stable-ish. But Apple have built that. Android have come out with Espresso, which I think they're just copying the latest drink trend. That's the name of tools these days. We've gone through vegetables. We've gone through fruits. We're now on drinks. So there's Espresso. It's not on the slide, but Facebook have made Earl Grey. So I don't know if anyone's using Earl Grey, but Facebook have made a tool which pretty functions exactly like Espresso, but for iOS. And then obviously Appium's improved itself. So I'm good friends with Dan Queller, the guy who created Appium, and we spent about an hour on Tuesday talking about Appium. And I said, why didn't you use Espresso? For those of you who don't know, Appium's moved to use UI Automator 2. And he went, why didn't you use Espresso? It's the coolest thing. And he went, no, it sucks. I was like, no, it doesn't. I've been using it. He goes, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for what we want to do. We had to use UI Automator. And he spent an hour lecturing me about the internals of Android. And I felt really bad. I felt like when testers go to like people who don't care and you explain everything you've done and how all the app works, and they just want to know if it works or not. And that's what it was like. I was like, does it work, Dan? He said, yeah. But Appium's improved itself dramatically. I pick on Appium because obviously it's open source, it's quite powerful. But one of the things that happened recently with Appium, when Apple introduced XUI test, Appium just kind of, well, not a lot of people's existing frameworks all kind of fell over, whereas Appium didn't fall over because it just changed its bindings underneath, so you don't have to care about the underlying technology. But this is the thing that's really exciting. These tools are now significantly more stable than they were 2.5 years ago. When I was trying to automate my app in the first place, they pretty much sucked. But now they're significantly better. And just as I left the company, we were able to now start having some automated tests back in place that didn't take 2 weeks to write, that were stable, that did run. And it wasn't because these tools got better, which played a part, but what actually changed in the overhaul was I knew what my users were doing, so I automated the right screens. I knew what they were on, what screens they were on. I knew what flows they were doing because the analytics told me. I was able to create data significantly quicker. By the way, they refactored that horrible Mongo thing after about 1.5 years and replaced it, so I could create data direct to Mongo. That meant I could set the state quickly. I could take advantage of proxies to put my app in specific states and make the data be deterministic. So therefore, my scripts are more stable. They weren't relying on data, or someone couldn't mess my data up. And then the tools improved. The tools significantly improved. As I said, now, if I was going to start a brand new mobile project right now, I would probably go native and just use Swift and XC UI test and Java and use Espresso. However, if you don't have those skill sets, now Appium is the go-to place now because they've changed their bindings and it's actually a really interesting tool. So a quick recap. There are lots of tools out there that support mobile testing and they are classed as automation. Proxy is automation, it's doing something for you. Writing scripts to deploy your app. Writing lots of dashboards to manipulate analytics and report them to you. It's all automation. Excuse me. Yeah, don't forget about the users. Actually find out what they do. How are they using your phone? We think we know what people do in our apps. We think we know the way our apps work because we spend all day testing them, but we don't. Users use your apps for lots of weird and wonderful things, and we need to do our best to try and find out what they are. And don't forget about the wider mobile infrastructure. As I said, sitting in a stadium full of 58,000 people, your app will do crazy things that you didn't know were possible. Go out there and try it, because at the end of the day, that's the difficulty in mobile. It is out and about. If you're sat at your desk and you only ever test at your desk, don't get me wrong, you can find lots of bugs. There's lots of tools to help you. but it's not the same as just going out into the wild. And you get time off work, you get some exercise. If anyone's got a Fitbit, you get some steps, and you find fascinating and interesting things. And that's how users are actually using your phone. And they're not just sat at their desk or at home just checking everything now and again. Some people use their phone on the toilet, which I think is disgusting, but people use their phones on the toilet. People use their phones on transport everywhere. Try some of these interesting scenarios and just see what happens. So this is what I want Poland to look like in the future. Oh, we've got sound as well. This is loads of people running through Central Park with their phones. Turns out there's some game called Pokemon Go or something, and some crazy thing had just spawned in Central Park. So it was literally a zombie. Apparently there was about 9,000 people. It's a bit loud. There was about 9,000 people running through Central Park with their phones like this. That's how we need to test our apps. I want to know if Pokemon Go thought about that scenario. What happens if you put this crazy rare Pokemon in the middle of Central Park? What will happen? It turns out people abandon their cars. Like, if you watch this video closely, this guy doesn't take his keys. He jumps out of his car and runs off. But it is true, like, hopefully we have lots of people walking around testing mobile apps actually in the field and how they're being used. I couldn't be able to recount the amount of bugs that I've found from doing that, and things that were actually really detrimental to the app's performance. So all these things that I've been doing, analytics, monitoring, using tools efficiently, that is just testing these days. It's just this story, you put it into a mobile context. And as the end goal was that we had a mobile app that was 5-star rated, as high as I could think is imaginable on Android, especially with the number of ratings we had. But it showed all this effort, all this work paid off. People started using the apps. O2 as a company started investing in our team more. O2 as a company came to us and went, why have you got 5 stars and our other app has like 3 stars? And I said, well, let me sit with them for a day. And I did, and it turns out the way they test was pretty atrocious. They literally sat in their office, spending most of their time on simulators and emulators and not actually using the phone. So I started coaching them, and now their apps are even better. So apparently this is a really good translation. The one I had 5 minutes before this talk was not. And I asked Joanna, does this make sense? She's like, no, it doesn't. So thank you for listening. Thank you for indulging me. I think we have a bit of time for questions, but not an awful lot of time. And I think that means questions. By the way, I know 0 Polish, so if anyone talks to me throughout the whole of today and apologizes for your English, I will slap you, because your English is significantly better than my Polish. I tried to learn hello and goodbye and kind of have the bill yesterday, and I still can't say them. So yeah, if you have any questions, and please do talk to me throughout the day. I'll be around all day. And thank you for listening.
Any cool stories from doing root cause analysis of these bugs that you found on Stadium? Like, how did you determine what was the issue?
So the thing we could do was we basically logged a lot of the app state and the phone state, so we could find out that the phone, you can basically steal quite a lot of information. So the apps, you can go to the device and say, do I have a signal? And the app will say yes or no. So we started logging a lot of that stuff out. But most of the time it was, basically we added more logging around our app. If it said there was a signal, we used to loop around a few times to see if there was. But a lot of the time, just turning the Wi-Fi on and off, trying to trick the app. The Underground in London where I was working, that's fantastic for testing. Because you see everyone, if you go in the Underground in London, everyone sits on the train. You call into a station where there's Wi-Fi, everyone gets their phone out and they're quickly like this. And as the train pulls away, you see people really sad that their tweet didn't send or whatever. Those kind of things were recreatable there as well. But yeah, mostly login was the thing that helped us. And also if it did crash, especially in iOS, we could inject it back in and find out what happened. But yeah, without the login, you've got no chance.
Have you monitored your power consumption or memory consumption? Because for me, very frustrating is the fact that some applications are there is some loop and they are pulling and checking all the time, and my battery just is over. So I'm just wondering if you have any ideas about hardware testing more close to the hardware, power consumption.
So there's loads of fantastic tools. So in Xcode, you can pull up the activity log and you can look at all the memory trace. You can do the same in Android's just Linux, so you can do the command to see the activities there and do a TCP dump and stuff. But what you can do is what I did was used to simulate a lot of scenarios and just watch the memory increase. But what that meant was I didn't have a clue what was going on. So I had to pair with the developers. So we got them sat next to each other, and it turns out that our app wasn't disposing of screens correctly or killing the end of threads. So that made us see that process and RAM was going up. So on Android, I don't know if this is still the case, but Android, the screens are all there. Every screen's actually in view. They're just hidden. Now, if you've got loads of screens that never close, that takes memory. So we started finding those things. Now, in terms of background data, again, the proxy really helped. So I would put the app in the background, and I could see it fire requests periodically. And then we actually altered that time. We actually said, why are we doing this every 5 minutes? And when I left, we actually stopped doing things in the background because the analytics told us no one used our app that way. The app was mostly open from brand new. People redeemed an offer and killed it again. So again, find out what your users do, but logging and take advantage of the tools, especially in Android. Like you can literally do anything you can do on a Linux machine. So yeah, you can find out stuff that way. Oh, battery is a good one as well. Watching the battery drop. Android again has lots of APIs, so you can look at what app kills all the battery, and you can see if your app is one of them. So we had a lot of animations that killed battery, so we made them more refined.
Yeah, I just wonder about the team that you had for the O2. I just want to know how many people you had, what skills they have, and what kind of experience they had.
So the team at the very beginning was quite big. We had 3 iOS developers and 2 on Android. And by the time we finished, it was down to 2 iOS, 1 Android, and 1 BA, and me. The other tester left after about 9 months-ish or so. And I think the reason the team shrunk was we just started, because we had a lot more information to play with now. It wasn't like crazy testing like we always used to do. We used to be able just to really go into scope and work out what was testing. But in terms of experience, the iOS developers were very experienced. They wrote a lot of unit tests. They were very focused on testing. The Android dev, not so much. He was quite junior. So he needed a lot more coaching. And the BA and the UX team were external company, but they really knew they really knew about UX. So that idea where we did the UX testing with the users, that came from them. But yeah, as I said, the team was relatively experienced, but we worked as a team, which was really important. They really understood what I needed to do. I understood what they were trying to do, which is why the testability talk they really helped me with that. They understood why. They were like, well, Richard, it's only taking you 5 minutes to test that. I was like, yeah, but it should take me 30 seconds. And then they would get on board and help me deliver it. But also the wider team needed to get on board because testability at the end of the day is coding on the app. So if they're coding testability for me, they're not writing new features. So I needed everyone to be bought in. And yeah, that involved people who liked to listen and understood testing. And a key for that was I know how to talk about testing, which I think helped. So.
Yeah, you mentioned test devices matrix, and that you, instead of using this test devices matrix that you initially created, you went to analytics and just understood what devices are most popular, right? So does it mean that you supported only those devices and the other not? And the other one, how did you predict new devices, like the incoming devices? Which of them will be most popular, and we should prepare our application to support them?
So. It's a really good point, a good question as well. So we had a 10% rule. So if it was used by more than 10% of our users, then we would buy that phone and we would have that in our device lab. And that would form part of our exploratory testing. We would use that app, use that device. Now, we were quite aggressive with that. So if it fell below 10%, we would stop testing on it. It doesn't mean we didn't care about that phone. It just meant we didn't have the time to actually test on it. So when bugs came in via the various, the app stores, play stores, help desk, then we would test on that phone. And in London, I don't know if there's one in Warsaw, but in London there's lots of device labs. So we would go to the device lab, borrow that phone for the day, and then test on it. So that's how we got around that. And we were also quite aggressive with operating systems. So again, it was about a 5% rule, I think. If 5% of users dropped below iOS 8, let's say, we would stop supporting iOS 8. So we were quite aggressive. And even though the numbers aren't that big, 10% of people was 28, well, a lot was 100,000 users. And we would just discard them. which sounds bad, but that helped us make the app work for the 2.8 million. So we had to do that. Now, in terms of new apps, new phones coming, it was a mobile network. So we knew what phones were coming before they were announced. So we used to get our hands on some of the phones before the public got their hands on them. So we were able to do a bit of testing up front. But in terms of like Android N and stuff like that, we would test them as soon as it was available. We had a Nexus 5 that we just used to brick and reinstall that version of Android on, and we did the same for iOS. But again, it wasn't extensively. This was like half an hour going through the most common used functions of the app based on what the analytics said, and then move on. Because of all the monitoring, the crash logs, as soon as something did break, we knew about it. So.
Okay, I'm afraid that we are out of time. Thank you, Richard.